Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Men and Sex. I'm your host, Mr. Wood. This podcast is all about some of the most taboo conversations and being able to normalize them. Here we talk about sex, we talk about intimacy, relationship, masturbation, porn, and today we're going to talk about something we've never talked about before on the show. My guest today is Gabriela Rosa, Harvard-trained fertility specialist, founder and CEO of the Rosa Institute. Welcome to the show, Gabriela.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here, and it's an important topic. So I'm glad that finally, in a sex podcast, we're talking about fertility.
Yeah, and for all the men, if you're like me and you hear the word fertility, maybe you're at a point in your life where it's scary. I encourage you to stay tuned. We've got some really potent things to talk about here, and it's so much more than just fertility. It's about
Yeah.
health, it's about sexual health, it's about longevity because we're living so much longer, and there's so much for us to see and learn about ourselves by looking at the health and functionality of this part of our body in connection to fertility. So, Gabriela, would you just share with us a little about your story and how you ended up here in front of me and why you care about the things that you care about?
Yeah, sure. So I have been helping couples overcome infertility, recurrent miscarriage, and failed treatments for the last 25 years. So since 2001, I have been doing this work. And what really is fascinating to me is that the way it started is very different to how it's going. For the last 14 years, it pivoted from me helping people prepare for a healthy pregnancy in a preconception type setting, just really kind of people who have just decided, okay, yeah, I want to get pregnant or I want to have a baby. Let's just figure out if there's anything that I need to look out for on the journey. And that was kind of like how it started. And then about 10 years into it, I had a lady come in who had been trying for 10 years and who had done multiple failed IVF cycles and nothing had worked up until that point. And she really came to me. I was like, oh, I don't know that I can help you. I don't know that what I do is going to be enough for what it is that you need. And she turned around to me and she said, look, I'm going to give up anyway. So I just want you to prepare me and help me be healthier if I'm going to do this one last time. And I thought, okay, I can do that. That's fine. And so I decided that, I always treated couples in my preconception work. And so I basically decided to get them both in and really optimize both of the sides of the equation, really. And as we did, about 4 months later, she was pregnant for the first time in her life, after
Oh,
never being pregnant again. And she was pregnant naturally with her own eggs. She was over 40 at this point. And so it was an interesting case because it showed me something that I didn't necessarily think could be possible, after they've tried everything. The golden standard therapy of IVF hadn't worked. And I was like early and naive, and I didn't realize that most IVF cycles actually fail, and so like it's something crazy, like across all ages, approximately 80% of IVF cycles that get started never yield a live birth. And when women are over 40, it ends up being close to 90% of cycles that get started don't yield a live birth. So the failure rate is much higher than the success rate, even though all we see when people talk about IVF is about the cute babies, and it's like, well, actually, that's not really the case. But anyway, so
can I pause you for a
after
moment?
that,
Can I
yeah,
pause
of
you for a moment?
course.
Will you just like in simple terms explain IVF to the listeners if they
Oh,
don't know?
sure. Absolutely. Yes. I forget that the jargon is jargon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Thank you for pausing me.
yeah.
So IVF is in vitro fertilization. So basically what happens in that process is that a woman will take some drugs and will have eggs being stimulated to mature at a greater rate than would happen naturally on a monthly basis, which is normally you mature and ovulate one egg. Through an IVF process, you're able to mature and collect surgically up to about 20 eggs. Most of the time, depending on a woman's ovarian reserve, it can be anywhere between two. eggs and 20 eggs or more. If that's more, then it's ovarian hyperstimulation, which can be life-threatening. So obviously, the protocols tend to keep it to a low manageable number so that the woman doesn't actually end up in at risk. But once that's done, the eggs are collected, then it's a process of getting the eggs to meet the sperm. And there's two different ways in which that's done. If the man has adequate sperm count and semen quality, then basically it can be done in a petri dish where you put an egg, you put 100,000 sperm around it, and let them go at it. If the man doesn't have enough sperm, then what happens is that there will be a selection process, usually visual by the andrologist, looking at a sperm that's moving, picking that sperm with a little kind of very fine needle and inserting it into the egg for fertilization. IVF is still a better process from a natural kind of perspective because at least the egg there are enzymes that essentially the egg releases to attract the sperm that most closely resembles its DNA that's going to be the best kind of match
Hmm.
for that egg. So it's not, nature's quite clever. It's not just a sperm is moving, let's pick that one and insert it. And that's why still, even though there is a small difference between fertilization rates and conception rates when sperm is good, IVF is still a preferred method in many places and in many cases. And sometimes, the reason that people will say that they want to do ICSI and some clinics only do ICSI is because they want to try and control the process, and try to make sure that that sperm is absolutely going to get into the egg so that they know that, okay, it's not a fertilization issue that we're having. And it's not necessarily the best approach, but it's how it's done. And so that's IVF ICSI. ICSI is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So that's what it stands for. And they're different in that particular way is that you can have less of a sperm count when you
Mm.
do ICSI, and you can have, just kind of just adequate, not necessarily good sperm if you do IVF. And this is one of the issues actually, is that sperm and sperm quality, let's call it a vital sign because really that's what it is. It's one of those like you have temperature be a vital sign, blood pressure be a vital sign. Sperm quality is a vital sign, really, because what happens is, and there have been studies on this where they've looked at men and with a diagnosis of infertility having an increased rate of mortality from all causes, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer after a diagnosis of infertility. And so 10 years down the track. And so here's the thing that happens that we don't often recognize is that a healthy body is a fertile body. And
Ooh.
yeah, absolutely. And vice versa. A fertile body is a healthy body. And so when things aren't adequate, and adequate is kind of my bare basic minimum requirement, like really when a woman and a couple is trying to conceive and the couple is having difficulty in achieving that outcome, nothing but superhero sperm is going to do, you see. And the reason is, especially if a woman is older, because what happens is that a 40-year-old egg has less energy capacity to fix the DNA fragmentation and the errors within the sperm that a 20-year-old egg would have,
Right.
right? And so when couples are the same age, if we don't have, and the modifiable piece here from a perspective of, if we're comparing egg quality and sperm quality is the much more modifiable of the two. Okay. And it's faster to modify it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So are you saying that it's better to go towards the man and him focusing on his sperm health? That's easier to impact, or that's the better place to impact?
You have to do both at the
Okay.
same time.
Yeah.
And the man has to step up to the same level that the woman is. So, for example, you know how most men think that in fact, sometimes people don't realize that alcohol intake, for example, is something that will impact both egg and sperm quality. Okay. Now, if I was to ask any man in 2026, I sure hope that they would know the answer to this question, which is, if a woman is pregnant, should she completely quit alcohol? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, in you get it right. Yes, a woman should absolutely 100% quit alcohol. Let's continue our little quiz. If a woman is trying to conceive, should she quit alcohol entirely? Yes or no?
I think so.
Okay, so is that a yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay, got another right question. Now, if a woman is thinking that in the next 12 months, she might like to be
Oh,
pregnant, should she entirely quit alcohol? Yes or no?
I personally believe so. Yes.
Okay, you only have yes or no. So,
Yes.
yes, bingo, you got it right. Now, if a couple is trying to conceive in the next twelve months, should a man completely quit alcohol at the 12-month mark?
Wow. Yeah,
Yes or no?
I'm gonna say yes.
You got it right. You see? And that's what most people don't realize. Most people don't realize that when you decide or when you're trying to get pregnant is already too late to impact the quality of the sperm and the egg that's coming down the track, you see. So what happens is this, and this is the really interesting thing about biology. Follicular genesis, which is the egg maturation process from primordial follicle to ovulatory follicle, takes up to 12 months.
Wow.
So the egg that a woman ovulates this cycle, this month, was
Wow.
in the process of maturation for the last 12 months.
Wow.
You see? So the last 3 to 4 months of that maturation process is where the egg is most susceptible to positive or negative exposures.
Mm, mm.
And so that is the thing that a lot of times people don't realize is that in order to improve and optimize the quality of the egg and the sperm, really what we're looking at and what we need to do and what we need to consider is the months prior to that conception attempt, because that conception attempt is already in the past in
Yeah.
terms of the modifiable factors that you can actually do something about.
Yeah.
So with sperm, it happens to mature and develop much faster than the egg. It's a 3 month cycle. But
Mm.
what happens is that what you do today is actually impacting the sperm that is going to come out of you in 3 months from now. So if you are binge drinking, taking drugs, doing whatever, you are not going to necessarily impact the sperm of today that already is ready to be ejaculated. You're going to be impacting the sperm that's going to come out of you in 3 months from now.
Mm.
And so hence why, and sometimes when we have a sperm quality issue and we have to address that, it can take up to 12 months. It can take up to 3 to 4 sperm cycles, which are 3 months each, to actually really change that result. And so this is why I say that if you're going to do whatever intervention you're going to do to help prepare a woman for having the healthiest possible baby, her partner needs to be in alignment with that from day zero, so that they both, when time comes that they're actually wanting to get pregnant, that it's a much more straightforward process
Now,
than if they don't do all of those things.
you brought something really simple here, but it's one of the things that I like to talk about the most with men, in particular in their relationship to sexuality. We're talking about it here with fertility, but this simple understanding that my habits and my behaviors have an impact on not only now, but the future. And so we're
Absolutely.
talking about now, what I'm doing now, and I have all sorts of things going in my head because me and my partner are talking about conceiving and fertility. So it's like, okay, wow, 3 minutes. I got a 3 months. I really want to lock it in. And
Well, it only does take 3 minutes, but that's a whole other point.
but this conversation, we're talking about we're talking about awareness of the things that I'm doing, consuming, like we talked about alcohol, but that's
Yeah.
food, that's smoking, that's the shows I'm watching, that's the things I'm listening to. Like we could go in so many areas and say all of these things and the impacts that they have on us. And
You see, and yeah,
one last thing is just like there's something profound for me that is the awareness that I'm willing to do that in the idea of conception, but why don't I bring my awareness to how I show up for myself in the ways that I'm consuming and my patterns and all of this to take care of me?
100%. And you know what's interesting about that? And I think that this is such a great point that you bring up. We've all heard of people who have never smoked a day in their life and died of lung cancer. And we've all heard of people who are chain smokers and never developed lung cancer at all. And so to that, you have to ask, but why? Right? Because we all know smoking causes cancer and predominantly lung cancer. But here's the thing, the reason why some people will be exposed to the exact same toxin and develop something different, like some people will smoke and will not develop lung cancer, they will develop cardiovascular disease. They might have a stroke. They might have, you see, so it's not that that exposure hasn't been negative in some way. It's just that it wasn't actually affecting their that particular system in the body. And so what happens is that different people have different predispositions. And that is why the same exposure can look different in different people, you see. And fertility is the same thing. It's really, really fascinating how the reason that most couples are, especially the couples that I treat, the reason that they are typically dismissed in terms of treatment is because the majority of the population, 96.3% of people who are trying, will be pregnant within 2 years.
Wow.
That is just a statistic from a population level, okay? Which essentially means that the people who are not pregnant after those 2 years are that kind of 3%, 4% that essentially are going to have a problem. So you have an entire system that is focused on addressing the problem for people who are the tiniest percentage of the population. And so with that, there are many other issues that, that arise because what happens is the healthcare system is not really focused on a condition that is not life-threatening and is not urgent in the same way that something like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancers would be.
Yeah.
You see, so most couples don't get the support that they need. And it becomes a situation that one, you have to educate yourself about what's happening and what are the possible options moving forward, because you're only given one option in the healthcare system, which is you go to your GP, you have a conversation about the fact that you're trying to conceive, they give you a referral to IVF. When you go and do IVF and it doesn't work, then what? You see, then you're back to what you would have had to do to begin with, which is your own research and your own understanding about the things that you can actually do to change it. And what most people will do is not spend a lot of time and effort in that process unless they have to, you see,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
unless they actually have a problem that they can perceive as being a problem, they won't do anything about it, which is reasonable and fair,
Yeah.
but not when this continues and the process goes on and on and on. Now, how does this relate to your general health and to what we were talking about before? You see, the exposures that we have in our day to day, there is nothing neutral. There's nothing neutral when it comes to health. You see, either whatever it is that you're doing is going to have a positive impact or a negative impact. And if you are having enough sleep, you're either going to have a positive impact on your health by figuring that out and fixing it, or you're going to be having a negative impact on your health by not getting enough sleep on a chronic long-term basis. And that is one of the things that will make a difference. But you see, every single thing in your environment will have an effect on your overall health, and your overall fertility. And what's really important here for us to understand is that, as I said before, the best way to ensure that you are doing everything you possibly can so that when the time comes and you're ready and you decide, okay, you know what, this is it, we want to be pregnant, and it makes it easy,
Yeah,
is to act pregnant now to get pregnant later. And it
totally.
applies to both partners. You see, it's that whole conversation that we had when I asked you, when we did our little quiz, and I asked you 12 months beforehand, should you be drinking or not? No, you shouldn't be drinking. And just like that, you should be treating your body in a way as if you, and I mean you, Ian, were pregnant right now. Because you see, what happens is that right now, both the man and the woman are carrying 50% of that little baby that they want to create within themselves right now.
Mm,
And so, what happens is that how that develops and matures is going to be a conversation for later. But
mm,
the building blocks that you bring to a conception attempt in the form of the quality of the egg and the quality of the sperm is ultimately what's going to dictate what kind of experience that fertility journey has, what kind of flavors it has. Because really, when it comes to it, if we're not proactive, we are going to have to deal with some consequence at some point in time due to the epigenetic nature of the types of imprinting that happens in sperm and eggs. So, for example, if somebody smokes, there will be a tag on that sperm that is going to negatively impact the health of the child in the long term. If a man drinks, now it's demonstrated through science that the same tagging in sperm occurs. And so the quality of your sperm is not just what you see under a microscope and that a human will look at and go, oh yeah, the sperm is shaped fine, it's got one head, it's swimming, it's doing its thing. That's not enough, because really the imprinting, the genetic imprinting that happens within the DNA inside the sperm is not visible in the types of tests that are done right now in terms of sperm count, motility, and morphology, which is the shape and how it swims. Ultimately, we are leaving a lot to chance and a lot on the table if we don't approach fertility, one, as a team sport, and two, in a very proactive way that actually supports health in the long term.
question. I recently watched a Netflix documentary and the focus was on like plastics and their impacts. What are some of the main things that men are facing when it comes to fertility, quality of sperm? Like what are the main that are impacting men? We talked about alcohol, we talked about smoking. I just brought in plastics. Like what are some of the main things that are impacting men's sperm quality today that, as we've talked about, is impacting our overall health?
Yeah. That's a really great question. And I'm going to start with giving you some really stark statistic. In the last 60 years, there has been a 60% decrease in sperm count in men, right? So the question isn't whether these things that we live in impact male fertility or impact a man's health. The question is by how much and individually how that actually shows up. And like I said before, for some people, their predominant predispositions aren't their reproductive system. So much so that we have 96.3% of people conceiving. It does not mean, by the way, that those are healthy necessarily, you know, sperm and eggs and babies,
Could that be
because
miscarriages? Could those be, because some of
it
those
could
be
add
miscarriages?
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And so what happens, and this is also another thing that people don't realize, when somebody does go to the process of IVF and we create embryos, and this is a notorious example where a woman will be stimulated, they will have, they'll collect 20 eggs, 70. I had a case like this in my clinic just the other day. They collected 17 eggs. They ended up with one embryo. And most of those eggs actually, most of those embryos started to die post day three. Day three is when the DNA activation of the sperm happens within the egg in that fertilized embryo. So when we're starting to see, we have a bunch of sperm, and all of a sudden on day three, we have no embryos, or we have like a very high number of embryos that are not making it. It tells us that, okay, there's something here within the sperm that's creating this kind of outcome. And it's very unusual for that type of situation where here we've got, 17 eggs, one embryo. Most of the time, the couple will be told that that's to do with a woman's egg quality because it's easy. Not because it's a diagnosis, not because there is a way to measure it, because there isn't, right? And so it's an assumption. And it's an assumption made on a shortcut that, again, is completely unhelpful because the levers for change are upstream from that event in the quality of the sperm, in the quality of the egg, and the cells that we are actually nurturing and producing overall in our bodies. If you think about it, within a 4-month period, every single red blood cell in your body is completely new. Every single one of them, right? And that happens for every single human. And so we have the potential to be nurturing our bodies and to be nourishing it, or to be detracting from it. And this is essentially what we need to understand, is that it's not so much about, what are the things in our environment, because we are swimming in a soup of chemicals, like for everything from the carpet on the floor, the paint on the wall, the things in our food, all of those things are going to have an impact. And this is why I'm saying that there is no such thing as a neutral impact when it comes to fertility. Either we are going to be nurturing our body and supporting our body, or there's going to be some kind of detracting from how our body's operating. So to answer your question about, what are the things in our environment? Well, it's pretty much everything. But we don't want to live thinking that, oh my God, I am living and therefore I'm at risk. So the thing about it is this, and the big rocks are the things that we already know, right? The smoking, the drinking, the plastics, that, like, we already have a concept and an understanding of these things. Therefore, let's act on what it is that we already understand and that we already know, because that is going to make a very important difference to what's going on in the overall concept of, one, how do we actually show up in terms of our health? And two, how we pass that health on to our offspring. Because in that concept where we already understand that whatever it is that we're doing in our day to day is decreasing our sperm parameters, right, in men, that has to be impacting humans in other ways as well, because that is just a proxy measure of good health, right? So we need to then figure out, okay, how do I remove the obstacles to optimum health and optimum fertility in the best way that I can? And how do I add in the things that are actually going to be helpful to support and nurture and nourish my body? So those are the questions that I think we need to have at the forefront of our minds, is like, okay, what are the obstacles I can remove? What are the things that I can willingly and knowingly do that actually move the needle? Because this is the other thing too, is that a lot of times people get on to doing all sorts of crazy things that make such a tiny little change. And, like, give you an example. People used to think that smoking was bad, so they started vaping, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, wrong approach, people, wrong approach, because vaping is actually demonstrated to have an even greater impact on sperm quality and just, just in general health quality. Sure, it doesn't actually give you the same risk of lung disease, but it actually gives worse risk in many other areas. And so we're now understanding that risk minimization is not going vaping instead of smoking. It's actually eradicating that altogether and maybe figuring out, okay, why do I feel I need that to begin with? And what else can I introduce that's going to be helpful for me in managing this situation? Sometimes people don't actually question, why am I actually engaging in this behavior? What is it that it's giving me? And how can I get that from something else that's going to be health promoting instead of
Yeah.
this particular habit or this particular way that I'm doing this? So I think that there are so many different questions. And really, what I think is important on an individual level is for us to have these conversations with ourselves and to have these conversations with our partners to really uncover, okay, what are some of the easy things? What are some of the low hanging fruit, so to speak, that I can implement now, even if I'm not trying to conceive now, but that's going to support my health and quality of life in the future. Because at the end of the day, this entire conversation about fertility is about long term quality of life. And the reason that I say this is because let me give you an example. By the time somebody is diagnosed with insulin resistance, okay, and insulin resistance is essentially where the body produces more insulin than what it would ordinarily to keep blood sugar levels at a normal level, okay, your glucose levels at a normal level. Now, for both men and women, insulin resistance, which has a lifestyle anchor to it, which is the more sugar you eat, the more your body's going to have to manage that blood sugar regulation process. The less exercise you do, the more your body has to regulate that and mediate that via hormones, i.e., insulin, in order to be able to maintain homeostasis. The
Mm.
less exercise you do, again, all of these things is going to play a role here. And so ultimately, what we need to understand is this: insulin resistance will increase the risk of implantation failure in women and even of the ability to be fertilized anyway, because what happens is that you end up with irregular cycles, irregular ovulation. And so for a female perspective, that's going to be a problem in terms of conceiving. For men, it actually has been demonstrated to increase DNA fragmentation. It has been demonstrated to decrease the quality of sperm, count, motility, and morphology. So we know insulin resistance is not a friend to fertility. Okay. But what we also know is that by the time you develop insulin resistance, if you do nothing about it, it is literally just a matter of time until you develop pre-diabetes.
Mm.
The research is very clear on a pre-diabetes diagnosis. It takes from a pre-diabetes diagnosis, it takes 5 to 10 years until you are diagnosed with diabetes.
Hmm.
So here is the opportunity. When you are trying to get pregnant and you identify that, oh, my insulin is a little bit elevated to what it's supposed to be, or my blood sugars aren't quite where they need to be, or there could be insulin resistance. That is the point at which, if you are wanting to improve your long term quality of life, you act, not by the time you already got diabetes. Because then, sure, you can still improve and manage a chronic disease, but then you are managing a chronic disease that has many other repercussions for your health and quality of life later. I mean, how many people have to get limbs amputated and, all sorts of devastating consequences of a diabetes diagnosis, go blind, you name it. So it's not it's not for fun,
Yeah.
that we're wanting to look at these things, and certainly that we're wanting to prevent the consequences of it getting much, much worse later in life. And at the time that somebody is thinking about or trying to conceive, where it's the most changeable moment of that condition, it gets ignored. It's like, what? So this is one of the really important opportunities when it comes to fertility, is looking at it like another vital sign.
I think this is one of the most important parts of this conversation is that I'm a man. I hang out with a lot of men. I've been in, these spaces with men's personal development for a long time. We're generally, I'm generalizing from my experience, it's not very common that we are just like taking, testing our blood, checking our sperm quality. I've never checked my sperm quality in my entire life. I'm 40 years old.
Uh, this is the time.
I'm ready. I'm ready. And same with, checking my blood and knowing my insulin and my blood sugars. So it's like this conversation about preventative care and caring before there's a problem. It's just like what, like you said, the things coming in, there are either positive and increasing our health, are they negative and having an impact? And there's a lot in the world that's negatively impacting today. And so the main thing I'm really hearing in this conversation for myself and wanting the men to hear is that we need to be proactive in leading ourselves to look at our health. And there's steps. One step is just to learn, like, oh, the foods that I'm eating and the ones that have negative impacts, the water that I'm drinking. Oh, I'm drinking out of a plastic bottle that's been sitting in the sun, the polyester I'm wearing. Like, that's one step. And a whole other step is looking at my blood, looking at my sperm quality ahead of time as a representation of my overall health. These are vital signs to live optimally. When that's really the opportunity I see for us, I talk to men mostly here, is like we have an opportunity to really live a high quality of health and if we're being proactive.
Exactly, exactly. And look, sexual function is nothing more, nothing less than ensuring that you are taking care of those areas of your life. Because, I mean, diabetes, neuropathies, erectile dysfunction is the next consequence, in terms of men's health. So it's not a simple just ignore it, it's fine, don't worry about it. Well, I mean, you're choosing, if you're not looking at these things and being proactive, you are actually choosing what is normal, which is entropy. And entropy, if you're not working on the opposite of it, which is syntropy, which is really optimizing, maximizing, you are going to have to deal with entropy. And that is decline and chaos and the system going into disarray. And that is normal if you don't combat it, you see. So that is just a natural, process that happens in nature. But it is possible, especially in 2026, to combat that and to change that if you are proactive. If you are not, you are going to end up like the old men that you probably know, right? That haven't taken those steps and those opportunities. And this is the beauty of this era, this age that we live in, is that there is every opportunity if you are willing to do the work.
Yeah. And, I want to speak to my younger self that may be listening, is that even if your path currently isn't, you don't have children in your map, that's not in your future. Speaking to my younger self, because that's what I thought for a long time, and now I want children. Even if you never want children, to look at this type of health and these vital signs is extremely beneficial, because if there's something going on in the quality of my sperm or my blood, like any of these things, it's all connected. It's all a system, and these are signs that something is going on somewhere that's not working for me.
100%. And I think that this is the biggest part of takeaway of this conversation is be proactive, go have blood tests, go have a semen analysis way before you think that you might want to do something, because often the things you will find now are things that are changeable, and they are things that you can do something about. You don't want to wait until you've already been trying for 2 years to then go and have a semen analysis to discover that, well, actually there is something that you need to address that you haven't done. Because also on the opposite side of, the health, there is the actual very factual piece that fertility is finite for women. 100%. And this is one thing actually that I think is so important for us to pinpoint and highlight here in this conversation, is that men, because men are told that, Hugh Hefner had a baby at 90 with a Playboy bunny at 20. They think that that's going to happen for them too. And let me just burst your bubble and say that that doesn't always happen in that way. And the reason that, a 90-year-old may be able to fertilize a 20-year-old egg is exactly because a 20-year-old egg can have the energy that it requires in order to fix the DNA fragmentation and the errors within the sperm, which is contrary to partners of the same age and or where a woman might be older, right, than a man in a relationship. And so what happens is that I'm not saying that you need to, every man needs to be with a 20-year-old woman, although, hey, go for gold if that's what you want to do. But at the end of the day, it's about really understanding that your contribution is so important that it cannot be emphasized enough that you thinking that one, a woman has time, a woman doesn't. At the end of the day, what happens is that if you are in a relationship where you don't want to be with that person for the long term, literally the best thing you do is actually break up with them and go and be with the person that you think you want to be. Because ultimately, a woman doesn't have the luxury of waiting around for you to be ready to want to have a baby eventually, right? By the time that a woman is 35 to, 39, ultimately, and especially if she wants to have, or as a couple, you want to have at least two children, that is your timeline pretty much set. Because it's not to say that women that are over 40 can't get pregnant. They do. They come to me all the time. In fact, right now we have a 47-year-old that we were able to help get pregnant naturally. But those are those are not the norm. Those are not the
Right,
common situations. And
right.
so what happens is that we really want to make sure that if you're not sure, like that's the first thing. If you are unclear, if you are unsure, it's probably not a yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the number one thing. The second thing is that if your partner has to nag you about doing the things that are going to improve your health and your fertility, you don't want it enough. Own it,
Yeah.
right? And not don't make excuses for it. Just own it to yourself first, and then be a man to actually say, hey, you know what? The things that you want and the things that I want aren't the same. And that is a much better outcome for everyone involved than stringing a woman along, going, oh, we have time eventually, this, that. Really, when in order to have the best possible outcome, especially when things haven't been easy, we need to have, and I will highlight it and say it all the time, superhero sperm. Anything outside of that is really not going to be good enough for a situation where things haven't been easy and straightforward. And the sooner you actually go and seek out possible answers as to why this is not happening or what's getting in the way, the better the chance that you have to actually overcome any challenges that you find. The longer you wait, the longer you leave it, the harder it becomes. And that is a really important thing to like be courageous, be brave, be a man, and go, all right, let's stare this in the face. Let's have the hard conversations and let's figure out what needs to happen from here because that is better for you and her all at the same time.
And the truth is, in my experience, at least, this is a conversation once again to like a man on the outside or in a different place in his life. Like a lot of people get pregnant not on purpose. And so
Yeah,
the way I'm behaving today, I might, I might be out in the world, not me personally, but me as a man that's like, I'm not gonna have kids. You might accidentally get your partner pregnant, and the way that you're living right now is going to have a direct impact on the child that you have as
yeah,
well. So it's like
yeah,
there's so many. I just like all the reasons to bringing them all together, which is to the simple thing that why don't we just take better care of ourselves as men?
100%. Yeah,
Why don't we just add in all the reasons of why we should take better care of ourselves, why our health matters, why we should raise our quality of life, and stack as many as we can, and then go, okay, this is why I want to show up for me and check my vital signs, check my blood, check my sperm quality, all of these things. So, I this podcast was for me. Uh, I know that this was directly for me, and everyone else is a bonus because this is so many of the conversations I'm having with my partner, and now I'm like, all right, not for three
Let's do
months,
this.
not for 3 months. I gotta get it together right now and get on my regimen.
Yeah, and and this is the thing. Once you learn, once you know, you can't unknow, right? And I think that that's a really important, powerful thing. And once we do understand that the things we do matter, then it's a different situation. Because, like sometimes we don't do the things that we probably could be doing that are going to be very helpful because we think, oh, it doesn't really matter anyway. It matters, and it matters a lot. And so understanding that already puts you in a different place because all of a sudden you can be more aware. It's really interesting because I like the purpose, like having blood tests, having semen analysis, having all of these different things is helpful, even from a watching a trend perspective within your body. You see, so right now, you may be in your 20s and you may not want to have children anytime soon. But doing a semen analysis to actually understand, okay, where are things at, right, is actually very helpful because it's going to give you the understanding later. And I say this because I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian disease, according to the doctor, when I was 18.
Hmm.
And so now PCOS became PMOS, which is polyendocrine metabolic syndrome, actually. And it used to be called polycystic ovarian disease. Then it got called polycystic ovarian syndrome. And now it's changed its name again. Long story short, there is an insulin resistance component to it, irregular cycles, as I've mentioned before. I basically was diagnosed at 18 because I had come off the pill, which I was only on for like less than a year, and decided, you know what, I just actually want to know my body in a better way. I don't want to be on the pill. And so I came off it and never got my cycles back. And I was
Wow.
like, this is weird. This is very strange. So I was working in a gynecologist's office at the time. And so I had a conversation with the gynecologist there and I said, listen, what do you think I should do? And she mentioned, PCOS. And then I went, okay, let me go and see somebody outside of this clinic and just, get a diagnosis. So get some blood tests, get a diagnosis. So I went and, the first thing that the doctor says to me, I explained that I had taken multiple pregnancy tests. I wasn't pregnant, but I wasn't getting a period. And he turned around. I was like, oh my God, like, honestly, I have to hear this. He goes, every woman is pregnant until proven otherwise. I'm like, yeah, but I've taken multiple tests and I'm not pregnant. So he goes, okay, let's just do some blood tests and we'll call me in 2 days for the results. So fine, I'll go do the blood test, call him in 2 days. Over the phone, he literally goes, oh, you have polycystic ovarian disease. And I'm like, am I going to die? Like, I had no idea what that was at the time, and I had no idea what it meant. And I said, so is that really serious? Like, is this like life threatening? Am I going to die? He goes, no, you're probably just never going to have children. Like, oh, that's one way to tell an 18-year-old that they have polycystic ovarian disease, that they're
Wow.
not going to die.
Wow.
So I was like, okay. And that moment, I was like, what does this mean? What does this mean for the rest of my life? What does this mean for, what I want to do in the future? And then, of course, it was from that diagnosis that I realized, okay, let me, one, understand more about what this is and how it impacts me and what I need to know for the long term. And then that's when I started to really be aware of things like, blood sugar regulation and what it meant for me and, all of those things. But what was really fascinating, even though at the time that I was given the diagnosis, I thought, you know what, I don't even know if I want to have children in the future. I might, but I might not. And so I'm going to just make sure that I focus and change the way that I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing so that I have the option, so that I have the choice to be able to do it if I want to, but also so that I take care of my health because by then I understood the possible consequences in the long term. And I have an entire family history of people in my family, my grandparents who have died of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And so I'm like, you know what? I don't want that to be me. I don't want to be like my grandmother. She had uncontrolled diabetes and ended up having several strokes. And one of them actually left her a vegetable in a bed for the rest and remaining years of her life. And
Wow.
I was there, my mum was taking care of her. And I was like, you know what? Even if it's just so that I don't end up like this, I'm really going to take care of my health.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how that whole process began and unfolded for me. And it has served me very, very well because, my health is really my biggest prized possession, is really something that really I focus on quite a lot
Yeah.
because of all of those early days and that early understanding. But I think that, for anybody who's listening in who might be at that earlier stage in their life, who may not know
Yeah.
that they want or don't want or this or that, like do it for no other reason than you just want to have great quality of life in the future. That is your number one reason to do this. Whether you then decide that you want to add to your life by having a child or not, then that becomes a different decision and a different conversation down the track. But really supporting your body, removing the obstacles to optimum health, and adding the things that nurture and nourish your body is always going to be a right investment.
Mm, mm. Yeah, that's it right there. Is just all these conversations that are around raising our quality of life and the many different reasons why.
Yeah,
It's like
absolutely.
we need as many reasons as possible, but ultimately it's just the simplicity of what I put in, what I do is going to have an impact on the quality of life, whether I want to have children or not. And I personally, that's my purpose is how do we raise our quality of life? If we're going to be here, how do we live the highest quality of life? So
Yeah.
I'm behind it. Gabriela, thank you so much for your time and this conversation and what you do in the world. Uh, sadly, and good for you, is that you probably have a lot of job security in the future. And
Oh, yeah.
because I know which way it's going right now. So thank you for what you do, and I hope that you learn how to multiply yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me.
And
Wonderful.
if there's any links that you want to share, I'll put them down in the description for the listeners.
Sure. And look, one thing that I will say, in fact, there's a couple of things that I think would be helpful for people to know. For those who might be interested in understanding more about their fertility breakthrough, overcoming infertility and recurrent miscarriage when other treatments have failed, is my book. And I have made it available free on Spotify and YouTube. So, of course, people can buy it on
Whoa.
Amazon, but the audiobook is free in those platforms because I just want people to learn. I want people to understand what are the things that they can do. And so that's going to be a place that they can start. And the other place that they can start is by following me on Instagram. I do a lot of patient education there. It's Gabriela Rosa, so Gabriela with one L, Gabriela Rosa, Gabriela Rosa Fertility. So, excuse me. So that's where they can go and follow me on Instagram.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm definitely checking out the book. And thank you, everybody, for listening. So much more to come. And remember that it's not just about having babies. Your fertility is about your quality of life. Go out there and take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Thank you.